Welcome to Dark Dice, our new actual play TTRPG podcast. I'm Travis Van Groff, and I have with me Hem, who is one of the players and also the DM of the lovely Lucky Die podcast. And we're here today to talk to you all about what this feed is going to contain, what this show actually is, because it's a little bit confusing. We did another show previously called Liberty Vigilance, and there were a lot of questions from people who didn't quite understand what it was. Was it an audio drama? Was it a actual play RPG podcast? What are those things? First, though, we'd like to say a quick thank you for listening to this podcast. There are a lot of really great podcasts out there, like The Lucky Die, Dungeons and Dragons, and many others, and you've chosen to listen to ours, and we're incredibly grateful. So this episode is not an actual episode of the show. It'll kind of run through what is D&D, what is this podcast, what is the general premise of what we're doing, explain the rules for sanity, the optional trait that we are using and abusing to no end, and getting into what our release schedule is probably going to be like. And we're also going to meet Rowena Granite Pike, one of the characters of the game, and get a little bit more about who she is. Hopefully she'll survive long into the show.
She'll live long enough. I mean, to be fair, if she dies in like the first episode, then I really shouldn't be here on this.
I know. We're taking a big risk here.
I know. Scary.
So we'll start with Hem. What is an actual play podcast, and what is Dungeons and Dragons in relation to that?
Oh wow, they are like two ginormous, very big separate questions. So an actual play. All right, let's start off with what a TTRPG is. It's a tabletop role-playing game. So if you're not familiar with role-playing games, essentially imagine sitting around with a bunch of mates, maybe with some pens and paper and some dice, maybe not, I've played games without, and one person basically describes the world and everyone else plays a character in that world. There are rules and they are varying depending on what system you play, and because we are an actual play, we've basically sat down and recorded us actually playing a game. The system we're using is Dungeons and Dragons. It's pretty well known. I don't know if you've heard of it. You probably have. If you're in any way involved in the role-playing game, you've probably heard of Dungeons and Dragons.
And if you haven't, that's totally fine.
Yeah, it's a loose set of rules which we kind of obey in most situations. It allows storytelling where not even the DM will necessarily know, the Dungeon Master DM will not necessarily know the outcome. Basically, you roll a dice when there is ever a chance of there being a failure. So, do you manage to climb up that wall while being pursued by 20 goblins? Roll a dice. That's kind of what it comes down to, really. That's what Dungeons and Dragons is. It's just a set of rules so that you can be fair and it still feel like a game. Like you can still win a thing or win at doing a thing. So that's. And
if you don't know the rules of the game, it's totally fine. This podcast will actually be brushing out a lot of the rules speak for the purposes of being really more story driven. I will mention now that our first episode is incredibly polished and edited, and it feels really spiffy. Caitlin helped us make it feel a little bit extra overproduced, and then episodes after it will not feel quite the same degree of...
The first one's pretty much an introduction into the world, and the story itself. That's essentially the point of any role-playing game, is to tell a story with a bunch of your friends. And episode 1, which Caitlin, who's also in the show... oh my god, it's definitely like this is a story, this is a thing you can get into, and then it's like, yep, maybe a little bit more table talk than episode 1 from then on out, but yeah, it's a slightly different feel, but it's a very good intro into what we do.
So Dungeons and Dragons is in its 5th edition. It's really easy to get into, and it's really emphasizing storytelling and collaborative storytelling.
Yes. So
characters create these players create these characters with incredibly detailed backstories. The characters create themselves.
They do. And they come out fully formed. I don't know ever what comes out of my mouth. I don't know why.
I have no idea. And you're playing a bard, aren't you?
I am, yeah.
There so many rhymes will be busted.
Oh, so many rhymes get busted. So many poems, singing in a different language. Fuck you, Aethel.
We'll have to produce those.
Yeah, we will. Yeah.
Fun. The goal of this story, though, is to be a collaborative horror story that will be told by all of us together. I don't control all of the outcomes. I mean, the players could just turn left and leave everything that I'd planned and go the complete opposite direction. We're hoping that doesn't happen. We are anticipating that some players will die. It is a horror podcast, and We've got the odds stacked pretty heavily against them. If you like eldritch horror, this is probably the podcast for you.
It's awesome.
What is the role of the dungeon master in a story like this?
Essentially, the dungeon master, storyteller, GM, PM, whatever you want to call yourself, is essentially to describe the world, to put forward the plot, to put forward plot hooks and deal with character backgrounds and motivations if that is the aim of the game, which it isn't always in every role-playing game. Sometimes it's, here's my story, get on with it, whereas sometimes it's, I'm going to work your character backgrounds in, and you do a great job of doing both. So it's pretty much describing the effects in the world and voicing all the other characters. For example, we might come across, I don't know, let's say a tavern keeper. You'll be voicing that random character, or we decide we need to find a guard, or we decide, or you describe the world itself and the effects of various traps and dungeons and, dragons, all that good stuff. That's pretty much the role of the DM in this.
So in the context of the game, I'm playing the world, every non-player character that they encounter, and I'll be determining the difficulty of the actions that they're rolling dice to try and exceed that number. And then the players, what is the role of players in this collaborative experience?
The role of us is to pretty much stick to the character that we've created, to roleplay their actions out. Also, to a degree, to follow the story and figure out, deal with our character motivations, deal with the quest or whatever it is that we're on, and also partially to see what Travis will do when I do dumb shit.
And to clarify, even though a lot of the players are very, very intelligent and know what they're doing, some of the characters have very specific flaws that they have to play to, or they're encouraged to play to, an effort to stay in character. Those of you who've heard our previous podcast, Liberty Vigilance, which was a sort of audio drama hybrid between that and an actual play, we had Wayne June as replacing my voice as the dungeon master or game master, and he's got a wonderful voice, but a lot of people didn't quite understand that it was a game at one point because Wayne June just makes everything sound so legitimate.
Ooh. Okay, the following happens in rapid succession. Horatius looks over at Diana, who preps the needle. Diana moves in for the needle. Horatius clubs Scientist 1 on the head, and he just goes down.
The following happens in rapid succession. McBride glances at Azad as she prepares the injection. With a few steps, McBride clubs the first engineer's head with a sickening crack. The engineer crumbles under the blow, and his signs of life disappear. Azad, distracted by the revolting sound, misses the injection, but Flick, moving slyly, positions himself quickly and slits the throat of the second engineer, knocking his victim's mask off in the process.
He makes it sound amazing, like he should narrate somebody's life is how amazing he does a job on that. But because this is definitely more of an actual play than, I say, Vigilance, like, all your ums and ahs and what the hell are you guys doing to me, that we can't lose that. Also, we mock you in places, so it wouldn't be fair to mock, mind you.
That's true. You can't mock that guy. So it's going to be myself representing my own voice in this story. NPCs will actually typically be voiced by someone else some of the time when it's appropriate. So real quick, what is an audio drama?
An audio drama is essentially scripted. It's a story that someone has written, and they've gotten sound designers and editors and mixers, and they have voice actors in, and basically come and read a script. It's essentially, if you think someone's performing a play on a stage, this is being performed for your ears only, rather than also visually. So that's basically an audio drama.
And to clarify, whenever you hear me say something to the effect of, the character's resolve were tested, or and the blow came for his head, and he attempted to dodge out of the way, that's typically when the rolling will take place.
Oh, yeah.
So there's...
Or if I come out with a huge spiel of background information, that's normally because someone's rolled a history check, and it's invariably me because I'm the bard. And rather than me going, oh, what's the history check on that? You've just given me the information to carry on, so... It's a little bit more streamlined.
We try to cut out rules that interrupt the story to some extent, and to keep it a pretty quick flow. When people ask, what was a part of the game, what wasn't a part of the game, history checks, typically I'll give an info dump and they'll record that later. And the original was just me saying the same exact words, word for word, or pretty similar.
what the character
or
knows.
us getting a quick message in Zoom and me going, "Oh my god, how much am I supposed to try to say to people? What?"
And to clarify, none of us are in the same room, so I don't
No.
know if we technically tabletop because we're in
No,
different
yeah.
countries.
I mean, like, tabletop is it used to literally just be like you're around the table, but with the advent of the internet and us becoming more of a global community rather than a very small, very localized one, it's I think it applies to basically any function where you can sit down with your friends or stand with your friends if you're at a standing desk, whatever, as long as you can interact with your friends in some sort of medium, be it like we've got now, like a Zoom call or a Skype call or a Roll20 or whatever it is, or you just get together and hang out on Messenger. It counts as tabletop, yeah.
It's a nice way for saying that some of us don't have friends in the same country. But
Some of us don't have friends, Travis. No, I'm joking.
well, we're friends.
No, we're not. Not according to TSA.
Not according to the TSA now.
I've got the TSA now.
So we've added one additional rule to the game. Well, one rule that will be very noticeable to individuals: sanity.
It's a very interesting thing because it affects our perceptions. So, although Travis may describe one event or one way of things coming out, if our sanity is, or stress levels, so we basically roll sanity and we then take stress as like a damage, a separate meter, a separate like health meter if you want. If our stress gets over a certain level, it actually messes with our perceptions, so that although Travis will describe one thing, something different has actually happened.
Yeah, it affects the player's ability, the character's ability to cope with the horrors that they've seen. And I've seen some people use wisdom, but having its own separate meter of how much stress people take on, not physical damage, can't be healed with magic.
Nope.
It just represents how skewed their perception of reality is. And if the stress goes from 0 to 200, similar to a very fun video game that people enjoy playing called Darkest Dungeon.
Yep.
Most players start off with a little bit of stress because of their backgrounds, and as they surpass 100 stress damage, they might mistake a party member for a monster in the heat of battle. At 150, they might think they're truly a threat to the party, and they might opt in character to have themselves chained or limited in some way so they don't harm their friends or family. And then at 200, they have a risk of death, a very real risk of death, or a permanent lapse into losing grip on reality in a very permanent way. So it's a new statistic that people need to be very aware of, though it'll be referenced rather frequently.
I also didn't realize until I spoke to him, apparently my character actually gave somebody else stress before we even started the game. So
She is a very stressful character.
She's not. She's chill as hell.
One other thing to mention about editing and the production itself, combat has always been a boring part of RPGs that I've listened to. It's usually a lot of dice rolling and kind of people say about maybe...
Yeah, it very much breaks the flow of and immersion of the game. Like, anytime you roll a dice, you break your character's immersion because you're literally stepping out of it to do something separate. You're not in character, you're not staying there. And unfortunately, combat is one of those, is so very dice heavy. You spend a lot of time doing it and working out why you're doing it, when you're doing it, and then, basically a round, if there's like more than 5 people, can take more than 20, 30 minutes in some cases.
So we'll be knocking down those rounds in less than 60 seconds with just sort of quick descriptions of what happens, with the exception of when a player says, like, I'm gonna try and shoot him in the ear canal. I think that'll be a nice spot to hit. Because Peter is very good at those sort of creepy...
Good, yeah.
his one-liners.
Or if we do something really ridiculously stupid, or we think of something really dumb, or we start laughing and have a joke about it, or whatever, as long as it doesn't interrupt what's going on, it generally stays in. But yeah, cutting down all the boring stuff, so you get it in highlight mode.
Absolutely. So it'll be a highlight reel. It'll be pretty quick. It'll be produced similarly to an audio drama, except that the players themselves describe their own actions. So there are some really goofy things that may or may not happen that I had nothing to do with. When a player kills something, I give them the option of saying how it died and what that looks like. And I will always stick to word for word, or as close as I can to what they've said, subbing out the word I for the character's name, for instance. Those will be present, and that's... we did edit the hell out of it, but it was for the purposes of keeping things running smoothly. And we've got some cool music to
Ease
back
of
it.
listening, for sure.
Junior Engineer McBride, pipe in his right hand, swings at the head of the closest ace, whose feet are scarcely touching the ground. The pipe collides across the ace's jaw, teeth cracking as the jaw sags, dislocated. The ace spins once before landing on his back with a sickening thud.
He does kind of like a, that's the power of the Keyblade, kind of like spin with the pipe. And he gets ready to take on the next ambusher.
Our release schedule, we are currently managing 2+ podcasts at the same time that are audio dramas. One's called The White Vault. The other ones, I don't think I can announce yet. I'll get in deep trouble, but they will be released pretty soon. As such, we're currently looking at a monthly release schedule. We're going to commit to an episode every month. If we're able to get a little bit faster, a little bit quicker, a little bit better at editing, we can release it maybe once every 4 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks. It'll never get past 2 weeks because that's just so much work. Yeah. But we're trying.
Coming from someone who does weekly releases, holy crap. I don't envy my editor. He's incredible. I can't believe he manages to do it. But we are not as heavily edited as we're going to be here on Dark Dice. So, yeah. 2 weeks is probably reasonable. And
you should listen to the Lucky Die, by the way.
I think they're okay. You should definitely listen to the White Vault as well.
Yeah. Actually, so who are the players? The players are, if you've heard the White Vault, it's the cast of the White Vault in entirety, including the writer, myself, the producer, and all of your favorite characters from Svalbard.
I think we're only missing Della Torre, right?
Oh, Rosa. Yeah, Rosa couldn't make it because she has a life.
The rest of us are too busy being nerds, so we were like, yeah, we'll do it. Yeah, basically all of us are there one way or another.
Yeah, so that's kind of who we are. You'll meet the characters mostly in the next episode. You're playing Rowena Granite Pike. Who is Rowena?
Rowena Granite Pike is a young dwarven bard. She got herself in some bother. So her father sent her to the only other family member he thought perhaps could turn her head, put her on a different path. So he sent her to Sindri Westpike, who she just calls Cuz because I have trouble pronouncing certain words, and forever I couldn't pronounce Sindri, so I just called him Cuz. And that's basically like the gist of what Rowena was and where she came from. She did something to get herself, which would cause her family embarrassment, and she got herself in a spot of bother, a bit of shame.
What is her background as a dwarf?
Her background as a dwarf, she has the noble background. Okay. So she's the daughter of a very powerful dwarven clan. The dwarven clan is involved in acquiring very powerful artifacts and basically a merchant house, that sort of thing. That's basically where she comes from. I kind of wanted her to have a noble profession, which is what being a bard is. Like, you can only really do it if you're noble, because you have like patronage and people like backing you out with money, and like it's the unruly child that has to be sent off to do something. I wanted that, but I wanted her to go off in shame. So that's where this comes from. I think I literally sent him like I think I sent you like maybe two sentences for her background. She's a noble. She got herself in trouble. Off you go.
And now she's going to live with her religious cousin to set her straight, I guess. Or maybe like this is punishment, perhaps.
Yeah, perhaps.
So the storyline will evolve and adapt as the players make up more things and as they create more bonds and relationships. And we hope you enjoy the story. It'll be coming out very shortly in October. We have just a few more things to put together to get the first episode out for you, probably by mid to late October. And otherwise, this is probably the happiest you'll hear us, except when we're cracking jokes and I'll sound super serious.
Yeah, and possibly definitely just start with it's just all doom and gloom and it gets worse.
Well, we hope you enjoy our show, and we'll look forward to returning back to you in just a few weeks.
Yep.
Until then, don't play games of fate.